Welcome back, my good people. I thought I'd finally get around to doing the video. This is an update as to what's going on next. So things really didn't go the way that we thought things were going to go in terms of what the next car was going to be. We had ideas of what we had planned at the start was to go down the path of an E38 7 Series or a S-Class. That's what we were really looking for, and we've managed to find something that is the absolute opposite in in many ways. Similar in some, but different in many. We ran out of money, so we couldn't afford a European car anymore. No, that's a joke. That's fine. So really, came about in a very typical way, as things always do. The opportunity came up to buy this particular car that we weren't necessarily looking for, but unfortunately, or fortunately, whichever way you want to look at it, the way things are going with the car market at the moment, certain cars that maybe hadn't been so popular in the past, or for example weren't so expensive to own in the past, have now kind of peaked in a fair amount of popularity, and this has kind of caused prices to, you know, skyrocket on cars that you wouldn't expect them to do so. So before I introduce you to the car, I'll do a little bit of explaining because it's really, you know, out there in terms of the direction of what we're planning on doing, and what people might think the direction of our business actually is. I've said it time and time again, I've been pretty thorough about the fact that, you know, we'll take on pretty much anything in terms of, well, anything, not pretty much, we'll take on anything. And this was one of those extreme examples of being one of those things that mightn't be expected, mightn't really suit the inventory of cars that we have at the moment, or the inventory of cars we've been dealing with customer-wise, but it's definitely something that belongs, you know, where we are and what we do. So I have a long-standing history with this particular car. This car was the first car that my family owned when they arrived to Australia many years ago, where things were a little bit different. Unfortunately, back then you couldn't quite immigrate so close to major cities, so we ended up a fair way out. So my dad had an arduous task of finding a car that was going to be suitable for a big family, that was capable and was able to, you know, get us from A to B, get a lot of us from A to B. I'm from a big family. There wasn't a great deal of options that were cost effective given our situation at the time. You know, they didn't have a great deal of money, so it needed to be a cost effective thing. Since then, I've been really fond of these particular things. Because of that, I've had a long life with them, so I've had 4 of them already, so I'm no stranger to this. The thing that I have learned is that they are incredibly reliable, they are incredibly robust and incredibly capable vehicles. So without further ado, I'll introduce you to what the next project is going to be, so I hope you're sitting down. So what we've got ourselves here is a 1988 Mitsubishi Pajero, as they're known here. Fortunately, if anybody does know Spanish, fortunately I've actually got a Latin background, and Pajero means something completely different in Spanish. So in American markets, they're sold as the Montero, and I think the UK market Shoguns, and then I believe that in Korea they were rebranded and sold as Hyundai Gallopers. So they actually have a huge following in South Korea, and if you haven't seen the South Korean scene for this car, it's really unbelievable what they do with these cars. But here it is. So it's a 1988, it is a V6, which is, I guess, one of the more expensive engine options in terms of the options that were available in this time. I got my first one after my firstborn son was born. I wanted him to kind of experience what it'd be like to have that as a family car in the same way that I did. So it, you know, it seems a bit, you know, corny, I guess, but there is a huge sentimental value with these particular cars. It came up, it wasn't what we were looking for, but it kind of was what we were looking for, because we wanted something that was a little bit, I guess, further away from the end goal as opposed to the BMW, which we got very lucky with in terms of its overall condition. So in the video, obviously this car presents extremely well. It is extremely well kept in terms of the interior condition. Mechanically it's quite good, and in perspective of mileage it's quite good as well. It is a manual, so it's my first manual, surprisingly. I've only ever had automatic Pajeros, are the only ones that I've ever dealt with. Outside of that, it is optioned with quite a bit, so it does have auto locking hubs, it has a sunroof, it has obviously had the CD cassette player. It is a 7-seater car, so in the back you do fit in another 2 seats, which we currently have out at the moment, just to make a little bit more boot space for what we're using it for. So unfortunately I gave away one of my tricks already, because there was a as you could probably see, the LED halo lights at the front, which very needed upgrade at the time, because when we first got the car, it had the standard halogen lights, and I do a little bit of driving out in what we call the bush, or out country way, where there's not a great deal of light. My parents live out that way now, and I have to do a fair bit of country driving every now and then, and of course the halogen lights that we had at the time were not going to cut the mustard. I'm not a huge fan of them, but weirdly with this car, I guess, I don't know, maybe because I give it a I give it a hall pass because it's quite a favourite car of mine, and I can accept them on there. But they do an excellent job. They're a full LED upgrade, so huge light output over the original light candles inside a glass box is what it was relative to, and now with the LED lights, they're, you know, super bright. In terms of that, there's been some other bits and pieces on the way as well. So when we got the car, the head unit wasn't working. Pulled the head unit out to have a look at what was going on in terms of fuses and whatnot, and it had nothing to do with that. The unit itself was just faulty, so we needed to put something in it, and because it is a double DIN, it takes up 2 slots in the head unit space. We needed to get something that was going to be adequate to fill that space as well, so we upgraded to an Apple CarPlay unit. So I guess even the way that things have kind of started, the direction of this build is going to kind of be in that sort of resto mod type thing, where it's, you know, modern touches to a classic car. I think they're an incredibly handsome car. I think that, you know, the design has aged really, really well and is likened to the likes of those design traits that those really, really classic four-wheel drives, hey mate, how you doing? Those real classic four-wheel drives have. So, you know, the likes of Mercedes G-Wagons, Defenders and stuff like that, they've got that real boxy shape. So I guess it's kind of like when you order your, chuck some LED lights in it, it's like when you order your G-Wagon off Wish. It looks the part, it's definitely robust. I had a second generation one that I did a 10-day trip with my brother. They haven't been quite as popular as, say, like a Land Cruiser or a Patrol. Historically, especially not in Australia, we've got a pretty big four-wheel driving scene here. Pajeros have just never been that popular because they've got an independent front suspension, which isn't favourable for off-road, real rugged off-road stuff. You're limited in lift capacity and things like that. Whereas now, I think what's happened is, because we're kind of locked into our own country, because it's weird and it's all COVID lockdown thing, people can't travel overseas as soon as they'd like. So then that results in people needing something to do some touring around Australia. So they then have looked towards cars that are a little bit more geared towards the long road drive as opposed to the off-road stuff. And lo and behold, there's the best car in the game. They are supremely comfortable on the road, well and truly capable enough for some of the real rough terrain that we've got out in Australia. So I think what's happened is people have kind of realised the merit and the value of these cars, which has kind of driven the prices through the roof. So we managed to get this at a very reasonable price, more than I'd ever paid for one of these cars, because they've always been very cheap, and I've been happy about that. But, you know, I'm also happy that people are realising their value. It's give and take, right? I guess like I mentioned before, the build is to be a sort of resto mod. We're going to restore it to a level where it's, you know, presents really well. I'm not gearing it towards off-road. I'm not gearing it towards making it any more off-road bias or capable. I've had one that had kind of been geared that way, winch and all the rest of it, but I don't necessarily want to go that direction with this car. I really appreciate the way that it looks, and I want to kind of keep it the way that Mitsubishi intended it to be, in terms of it being an SUV, sort of an early generation SUV. It's a furthest thing from an SUV in comparison, retrospectively speaking now. I mean, it's super mechanical, it's like driving a truck, very agricultural in terms of how it feels to drive. But back then, this was the early days where they were kind of going, oh, well, you know, let's still put a low-range gearbox in it, but make it nice on the road. So I do want to kind of bring it back to its original state. Not entirely like that. Last time around, I did say we wanted to do, eventually we'll do something, you know, concourse. You know, this is not going to be the one. So I'm sorry if that's what you're waiting for, but we are going to kind of move it back to its kind of original state. I do appreciate the lines and the way that the car looks with the stock body. Every single one I've had has had bull bars. So now I'm on the hunt to find a standard front bar. So I'd like to go back to a standard front bar, which really does accentuate the way that, you know, the car looks in terms of its original format. Going to go back as original as I can. I do have some really small 205 wide tyres on it. I took it off-road yesterday, actually, just to see if everything in terms of the four-wheel drive system was working, and again, it surprised me how capable something like this is in terms of its off-road capability, given that, you know, it's on such small width tyres and it's old and it doesn't have a great deal of power. It's a 3-litre V6, which I think makes about 140 horsepower, which back then was good, now not so good. Not so pleased to clean it today because there was things everywhere that were coming out from underneath and the smell was terrible. But the car did an incredible job. That's just what they do. They do the road really well and they do the off-road good enough. At this stage, the plans are get the front bar back to standard, do a couple of bits, tidy a couple of bits up because it has spent some time in the country, so it's quite dusty and dirty in like window seals and jams, so like a super deep clean is necessary. I'm talking like getting in the window rubbers and all that sort of stuff because the dust is everywhere. When we got the carpet was completely disgusting, discoloured, absolutely rank, and it would not do. No matter what you did in terms of vacuuming it, you were never going to bring that back, and it looked really bad. So fortunately for me, there is a carpet moulding business, I suppose, that not too far away from us, so we're able to knock up a front and rear carpet set. So that's Knox Auto Carpets. For anybody that's watching this locally that is looking to do that, Knox Auto Carpets have the front moulds. So we did that. Unfortunately, they don't have the rear carpet mould nor the wheel arch mould. So we've also, in the time that we've had it, we've only had it for about a week, and it was quite a complicated registration transfer with this particular car. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to film a great deal of that. So I've got a couple of before and afters that I'll throw in, but haven't really had the time to record everything that we've been doing so far because it's just been absolutely crazy into every day, you know, getting in early, leaving late, trying to get as much done, not just with this car, but with a lot of elements of our business that, you know, maybe I'll do a separate video about. So anyhow, we did the rear carpet arches, we cleaned them up, we dyed them, and then we pulled out the rear carpet, which was worse than the front, and we replaced that with a rubber mat, like a ute mat is what we call it here for our utilitarian vehicles, and cleaned up the rear, just, you know, in and around, just to make it look as tidy as we can. So now the interior is really like nice and presentable. It's a nice color combination. It's kind of this blue-gray color. I haven't had one in this interior combination. The last one I had was brown, which I entirely redid in white. So I pulled all the interior out, black carpets, and I repainted the whole interior white. A couple of like timber accents. Look really cool. I'll throw some photos in there so you guys can see what that build looked like. It was really, really nice. It was a black on black car. Super, super nice. I really liked that one. So ever since then, I've been dying to get back in another one. And then obviously this came up and it was the one that we needed to have. So that's what's happening so far, or what's happened so far, what's going to happen from here on in. Like I mentioned, do that front bar again. This will be the first car that we're gonna send out to get painted. Test the waters, I suppose. We're gonna just try it out. There is a gentleman in our local area that does resprays for quite an affordable price, closed door resprays. So we think that, you know, the direction and sort of price point and stuff like that of this car, we're gonna take a punt on that and see how it goes and see how that goes, because it is quite affordable, so we're going to give that a crack and see how that goes in terms of the overall finish. Painting the car is going to be a huge step. There is a couple of bits and pieces in around, has had a couple of bumps. It's an off-road car, it's, you know, 30 plus years old. It's expected for it to have a couple of battle scars. So the interior was reflective of that. That's now been resolved. Now it's kind of just sort of exterior aesthetic stuff like the paint and whatnot. That will be happening over the course of the next couple of weeks, so we'll see how that goes in terms of the direction. Mechanically, the car's really good. Happy with it. So a couple of prangs here and there, which we are going to sort out, and then we're going to get the car painted and it's going to look magnificent. So here it is, cat's out of the bag. I'll try and do some more regular posts and updates and whatnot, and I'll probably be doing, you know, following along. If you are following this channel on YouTube, why don't you follow us on Instagram, and then that way you can kind of see the small posts as things progress. Like I said, we've kind of been hibernating in terms of focusing more on our own stuff because of the lockdown. Now we've moved away from that, so we're now taking customer cars and whatnot, so we'll be tied up with them as well. So I'll try and post as much about this car and the way that it progresses. That's what's happening so far. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and follow along in the series. If you are interested in following along the series, like and subscribe, hit your bell icon, so at least that way you're getting all of the updates as they come along. But thanks again for watching the video.